I'm super excited to share with you a tool that I found recently that is ridiculously powerful when it comes to controlling and managing your emotions. So if you want to learn how to control and manage your emotions, this video is definitely for you. This tool is like magic. I absolutely love it, and you're gonna love it too. So before I share this special tool with you, I do want you to remove 2 words from your narrative. Remove these from your vocabulary because they just don't have value. And those 2 words are negative emotions. So there certainly are lower vibrating emotions, and there certainly are higher vibrating emotions. However, to say an emotion is negative is kind of a misnomer. The reason why there's no such thing as a negative emotion is because emotions have one purpose, and that purpose is to bring an awareness to motivate you to take an action, okay? So emotions are a super critical part of our evolution, right? They've helped us survive, thrive, and avoid death, danger, okay? So we want to regulate and manage them, but not so much repress or suppress them. So when you gain a little knowledge on what the purpose of an emotion is, that shift in perspective really allows you to get one step closer to managing and controlling your emotions and your feelings much, much better. All right, so let's get into this simple tool that I want to share with you. It's actually an equation. Don't get nervous. I know that brings back bad high school memories. It certainly does for me at least. However, this tool has gained a ton of clarity with my emotional mastery, and I just feel like I've upped my game when it comes to emotional intelligence. So let's get into it. Here it is. So here it is. Your emotional response or reaction is equal to your expectations minus your perception or your perspective on things. Let's talk about it. So the best way to explain this is by giving you an example. So one of the examples I like to offer you is this. Let's say that a friend of yours invites you out to this restaurant and they play it up. So they tell you it's 5-star, it's the best, the chef, the food, the appetizers, the desserts, it's all high end. So they raise your expectations. Now when you walk in, all of a sudden your expectations were to a certain level, but you look around and you don't get the best interaction with the hostess. You don't feel the place is clean. Even the parking was a bit difficult. Now what's happened is your perception and your perspective on what this restaurant really is lower than your expectations. So there creates a gap. So when your expectations are higher and your perception or your perspective on what you're actually experiencing is lower, that creates a negative emotional response, a negative emotional reaction. Now, let's say you go to that same restaurant, okay? However, the person you go with this time doesn't play it up. They say, hey, let's go try out this new restaurant. So you start off with a lower expectation, but yet you have the same perception and perspective as you would in the previous example. Well, now, let's say that your expectations were here, but your actual perception was, hey, you know what? The food actually was pretty good. I'm glad that I went through the struggle with the parking, and even though the hostess wasn't that nice, boy, that entree I had, the appetizer I had, were really good. So your perception goes up. The wait staff was really kind to you. So now your expectation was lower, maybe the same perception or perspective. However, you see how that equation, the 2 variables of expectation and perception or perspective, they can actually have a very powerful influence on what your emotional response or emotional reaction is. So let's get into discussing the 2 variables that you can control, one of which is the perception, your perspective on things. I want to cover that first because it's a choice. It's an active choice you make. So let's talk about it. And let's talk about how you can manage it and manipulate it to control your emotional response, your emotional reaction more. So let's talk about the power of perspective, right? That perception you have is a choice. And so it's one that you choose, so you have control. Ooh, gotta love that word, control, right? We all want to have things in our control. So this is one of those variables that is within your control. So what you wanna do is think about it like this. Whenever you have a situation take place, always consider alternative perspectives, okay? So an example would be this. You're driving down the highway in your car, all of a sudden some guy cuts you off, super aggressive. You have an emotional reaction because you're like, this guy's jeopardizing my safety, the safety of my family, my wife's in the car. Who does this guy think he is, right? But then, interestingly enough, your wife says, whoa, 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 you need to simmer down. That's not what I saw. And you say, well, what did you see? Well, she happened to notice in the passenger seat, there was a woman who clearly was pregnant. She got a good view at her because at the last stoplight, let's say she was looking down and noticed the woman, right? And so she has a completely different perspective on the situation. And so she says, oh my God, maybe they're finally having their child. They're going to the hospital to deliver a baby. So her perspective is completely different. So therefore her emotional reaction, as you can anticipate, is that of joy, happiness, and excitement for that family. And they're saying, hey, go for it. Whereas yours was anger, frustration, possibly retaliation, right? So look at that big gap between the emotional responses or reactions. I'd say more of a response with the woman and more of a reaction with the man, right? In that situation. So super powerful, right? So one of the most powerful actions you can take when you're in a situation and you're in an experience is create just that little bit of space, enough space for you to challenge your perspective. Challenge yourself to come up with 2, maybe even 3 perspectives to each event or experience in your life, and you gain complete mastery of your emotions and control because you master and manipulate that one variable in that equation. Super powerful. So let's talk about the second variable that you control, which is your expectations. So expectations are things that we set ourselves, so they are also a choice. So this also is a variable that we can control. So what you want to do is set realistic expectations. That's huge. Realistic expectations. And also realize that you don't want to be too stiff in your expectations. Consider the fact that an expectation should also be somewhat malleable, somewhat movable, okay? You don't want to have a strict, tight, non-negotiable expectation. Let them have a little freedom to move and wax and wane a little bit based on the situation or the experience you're having. So in working with professional athletes, one thing I've learned is that you want to set expectations based on processes that you can control and not outcomes that have too many variables that you can't. So 2 examples of that would be you can control or set expectations on your attitude and also your effort. So those are 2 things that you can completely set as expectations because they're within your control. And the best part is they're process related and they're not outcome related. When you start focusing on these outcome expectations, that's where there's a lot of risk and a lot of things tend to go wrong. So to wrap things up, the most important part about this equation is the fact that it creates the space for you to not just have an emotional reaction, but instead to have an emotional response. And that's where the power is. Reactions are on autopilot, responses are more so in our control, and they're more regulated. That's how you control emotions. You respond to them instead of react with them. So I love hearing from you guys, so go ahead and share your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and gently press that like button. Everyone wants you to smash it. There's no smashing here. Control your emotions. Don't get aggressive with that like button. And thank you so much for your time. I truly do appreciate it. Thank you and have an awesome day.